Human joked he'd marry the little alien girl when she grew up. After growing up, she forced him to do the unexpected. The stars were silent as the large spacecraft hummed softly, cutting through the vast expanse of the galaxy. The endless black of space stretched out before them, broken only by the distant glow of distant stars. Aiden Cross stood at the observation deck, his broad frame silhouetted against the starry void. The blue and green swirls of the planet below were visible through the viewports. It was his mission to survey the recently discovered planet Veyrith. The humans had just begun their slow but steady integration into the Galactic Alliance, and Veyrith was one of the few planets they hadn't fully mapped. Aiden had always been practical, focused, and dedicated. He had spent years serving in the elite Starfleet commanding ships, executing missions and following orders. But today something felt different. The planet beneath him wasn't just another mission to check off. It felt personal. A soft sound interrupted his thoughts. He turned and there she was, a young girl standing at the entrance of the observation room. Her wide eyes reflected the stars, and she gazed up at Aiden with curiosity. She looked like she belonged to the planet, though Aiden couldn't tell just yet. The girl was small, not much older than 12 or 13, with dark purple skin and hair that shimmered like the night sky. Her delicate features were contrasted by the strong expression in her eyes. "Are you an explorer?" she asked, her voice high-pitched and innocent. Aiden tilted his head, slightly amused by the child's directness. "You could say that," he replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "What are you doing here, little one? Shouldn't you be with your people?" She shrugged and stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound on the cold metallic floor. "I wanted to see the stars, and I wanted to ask you something." Her voice had an earnestness to it that was surprising for someone her age. She was fearless. Aiden raised an eyebrow. "Ask me something." The girl hesitated for a moment, as if considering her words carefully. Then she spoke, her eyes not leaving his. "Will you marry me?" Aiden blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected question. For a moment he couldn't tell if she was joking or if she was serious. "What?" he asked, chuckling. He wasn't sure if this was a cultural practice or simply the innocent musings of a child. But either way, her request was out of place in such a formal professional setting. The girl didn't flinch, though. She stood her ground, her tiny form unwavering. "When I grow up, you'll marry me," she repeated, her voice surprisingly firm. "You promised. You promised when I was younger." Aiden looked down at her, still trying to understand. "I promised. What do you mean by that?" "On the day my family first welcomed you to Veyrith," she explained, her tone almost nostalgic, as if she were recounting a memory. "You said you'd marry me. You said it was a promise. You gave me your word." Aiden's mind raced. He tried to recall the first time he'd met the Veyrithians, the formal diplomatic meetings that had become routine in his line of work. He must have met this girl during one of those early encounters. Still, the idea of making a promise like this seemed absurd. He couldn't remember saying such a thing. "That sounds like something I'd say," Aiden said with a smirk, shaking his head slightly. "I'm sure I didn't mean it, though. You know how it is. I make promises all the time." The girl didn't seem deterred. "But you have to keep your promise," she insisted. "You'll marry me when I'm old enough. It's the way of things." Aiden's smile faltered as he gazed at her, seeing a hint of conviction in her eyes. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about. You're too young to even understand what marriage means." She shook her head, her expression unwavering. "I do understand. When I grow up, I'll be ready. And then you'll marry me. It's a promise between us, between our worlds." "You'll see." Aiden felt a pang of confusion mixed with discomfort. Was this some kind of cultural tradition of the Veyrith people? Or was this child just playing games? He had no idea. Still, something about the way she said it with such certainty made him wonder if this was something more significant than just a child's fantasy. He crouched down to her level, looking her in the eyes. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" She nodded solemnly. "I am. You'll keep your promise. I trust you." Aiden felt a chuckle escape his lips, despite the situation's absurdity. All right. If you're so determined, I'll promise you this. When you grow up and you're ready to make that promise yourself, I'll marry you." The girl's face lit up with a smile so wide it almost seemed too large for her face. She threw her arms around him in a hug, surprising him. "It's a promise then," she declared joyfully. Aiden, unsure of what exactly he had just agreed to, patted her on the back awkwardly. "It's a promise, I guess," he said, standing back up. "Now go back to your family. You shouldn't be out here alone." The girl released him and stepped back, her smile never fading. "I will, but remember Aiden Cross. When I grow up, you'll marry me." With that, she turned and ran out of the room, disappearing down the long hallway, her laughter echoing faintly. Aiden stood there for a moment, still processing what had just happened. He had made a promise, yes, but it was a promise made in jest. Or at least that's what he had thought. The encounter seemed almost surreal, like some strange dream. He'd promised to marry her. Of course, when she was older, the whole thing would likely be forgotten or laughed off. There was no way anyone would take a child's declaration so seriously. He was certain that this would be the last time he'd hear of it. But deep down, something tugged at him. A feeling faint but persistent that perhaps there was something more to this than just a child's innocent whim. He pushed it aside, telling himself he was simply overthinking things. He'd fulfilled the moment's whimsy, but it was nothing more than a fleeting promise, forgotten almost as soon as it was made. Or so he thought. The years had passed in a blur for Aiden Cross. Missions, assignments, battles, and the humdrum of space travel were the constants in his life, and yet his mind would often wander back to that strange encounter with the girl on Veyrith. He hadn't thought much about it after that day. The promise was a joke, a fleeting exchange. At least that's how he had believed. Yet here he was again back on Veyrith, the planet now officially part of the Galactic Alliance. Aiden had been tasked with overseeing diplomatic talks and assessing the planet's integration into the larger cosmic community. It had been years since his last visit, and everything felt different now. The Veyrithians were an enigmatic people, beautiful in their own way, and their civilization had flourished for millennia. But none of that prepared Aiden for the moment that awaited him. He was walking through the grand crystal-lined halls of the Veyrithian palace, his boots echoing off the polished floors. The building, like everything on this planet, was designed to invoke awe. Tall spires reaching toward the sky, radiant windows refracting the sunlight, and walls adorned with intricate artwork that told stories of ancient civilizations and grand achievements. Aiden's thoughts were far from these grand displays of architectural beauty, however. His mind kept circling back to the promise he had made to that young girl with the starry eyes. He had half convinced himself that the whole thing had been a child's fantasy, that she had likely forgotten him by now. After all, it had been a decade. She would have grown up, moved on. There was no way she'd still be interested in a fleeting joke from years ago. But as he turned a corner, he saw her. The hallway opened into a vast atrium, bathed in light. At the far end, near the grand balcony that overlooked the lush gardens of Veyrith, stood a woman. She was tall and elegant, her violet skin shimmering subtly in the light, her long dark hair cascading down her back in soft waves. She was breathtaking, her presence, commanding the attention of anyone in the room, though she stood alone. There was an air of nobility about her, a sense of calm power that radiated from her every movement. Aiden froze. It was her. It was the same girl, but she was no longer a child. She was a woman, and a striking one at that. The girl he had made a foolish promise to had grown into someone entirely different, someone who now carried an aura of authority and grace. She was the epitome of beauty, her features sharper, more refined, yet still carrying the innocence of the girl he had met all those years ago. Her eyes, those same bright, starry eyes, locked onto his in an instant, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. "Aiden Cross," she said, her voice smooth and confident, yet there was an unmistakable warmth in it that tugged at his heart. "It's been a long time." He felt his breath catch in his throat. He hadn't expected this. Of course, he had expected the Veyrithians to be formal, diplomatic, even reserved. But this was different. Her presence had a magnetic pull, one that made the air around him feel charged with anticipation. You're... Aiden stammered, struggling to find the words. He'd seen many beautiful women in his time, but none had ever taken his breath away quite like this. She was everything he remembered and more. The childhood innocence was gone, replaced by a powerful woman who seemed to possess the very essence of the stars themselves. "I know. It's a lot to take in." She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm Zeira." Aiden felt a strange sense of awe as he gazed at her. "Zeira," he repeated. He had expected a reunion, but nothing like this. She was the same person, and yet she was entirely different. Gone was the playful child with a promise. In her place stood a regal woman, one who had clearly grown into her destiny, one that was far more than he had ever anticipated. She smiled a small curve of her lips that was at once warm and knowing. Yes, it's me, the girl you made a promise to. Her gaze held a certain intensity, almost like she was waiting for something from him, a response, an acknowledgement. Aiden's mind was still reeling. He was supposed to be a seasoned officer capable of handling difficult negotiations, of navigating political minefields, but right now facing Zeira, he was at a loss for words. You're different, he said, finally finding his voice. It sounded almost like an understatement, but it was the truth. She was stunning. Her beauty was not just in her physical appearance, but in the way she carried herself. There was a regal elegance about her that spoke of power, of leadership, of someone who was destined for greatness. Zeira chuckled softly, her eyes glimmering with amusement. I've grown up, Aiden. A lot can change in 10 years. Her voice was a melodic mixture of wisdom and youth, and it sent a shiver down his spine. But you haven't changed much. You still look like the same man who promised to marry a little girl. Aiden's face flushed, but his smile returned, albeit awkwardly. I didn't think you'd take that seriously, he said, trying to deflect the intensity of the moment. It was a joke, a silly promise made to a child. Her eyes softened slightly, but the intensity never left. Maybe, but a promise is still a promise, and I'm here now, ready for you to fulfill it. Aiden blinked, unsure of what to say. He had assumed that time would dull the memory of that innocent exchange, but it seemed Zeira had held on to it, and more than that, it seemed she had grown into the idea of that promise. She had turned it into something more than he could have ever imagined. The weight of the situation slowly began to sink in. This was no longer a simple joke. Zeira was no longer just a girl with starry eyes. She was someone who had made her own path, someone who now held the future of her people, and possibly even more in her hands. The promise he had made all those years ago was no longer a harmless jest. It had become something more significant, something that could change the course of everything. And as he stood there face to face with Zeira, he realized that the future he had envisioned for himself was now uncertain. His life, his duty, his future, all of it seemed to hang in the balance, tethered to a promise made in the stars. Aiden Cross stood in the heart of Veyrith's grand palace, the weight of the universe suddenly feeling heavier than it ever had. The promise he had made to Zeira, long buried in the back of his mind, had resurfaced in a way that no one, not even he, had anticipated. What had once seemed like an innocent, fleeting joke had evolved into something far more serious, and now Aiden found himself at the center of a political storm he had never imagined. Zeira, now a woman, stood before him, poised and composed. Her beauty and grace were undeniable, but it was the aura of power she exuded that truly struck him. There was something in the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence, the self-assuredness in her every movement. She was no longer the playful girl he had once known. She was a leader, someone who had grown into her role within the complex web of Veyrithian politics. I know this must be overwhelming, Aiden, Zeira said softly, her voice gentle but firm. But I need you to understand something. Aiden turned his gaze toward her, his mind still spinning. What are you talking about, Zeira? I'm not sure. I am not just a woman, she interrupted, her eyes locking with his. I am the heir to the throne of Veyrith. I am a symbol of the power and future of my people. And now you are connected to all of that. Whether you like it or not. Aiden froze, his thoughts stalling in place. He had known that Zeira was important, but he had no idea just how important. His mind reeled as he processed her words. The girl who had once asked him to marry her was not just a naive child anymore. She was the future of an entire planet. You're the heir, Aiden asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The heir to the throne. But you're so young. I had no idea. Zeira smiled, a bittersweet expression that held both pride and sadness. The Veyrithian monarchy is not ruled by age, Aiden. It is a matter of blood, of destiny. My family's lineage runs through me, and now it's time for me to step into the role that I was born to play. The weight of her words hit Aiden like a physical blow. In an instant, the promise he had made as a young, carefree officer was no longer just a personal matter. It had morphed into a much larger issue, one that had political and galactic implications. He wasn't just being asked to fulfill a promise, he was being asked to align himself with the very future of an entire civilization. You understand the gravity of this, don't you? Zeira continued, her voice calm but insistent. If you and I become whatever it is you think we are, it will change everything. The fate of Veyrith, the stability of the galaxy, everything. My people need me, Aiden. They need me strong, decisive, and untouchable. A relationship with you with a human will be seen as a betrayal by some, and by others as a political alliance. There is no room for weakness here. If I show any sign of vulnerability, I risk everything. Not just for me, but for all of us. Aiden struggled to process the whirlwind of thoughts crashing through his mind. He had always prided himself on being level-headed, on making decisions based on logic and duty. But now he found himself caught in a battle between reason and emotion. On one hand, there was his promise to Zeira, a promise that had always been a lighthearted one, a joke, an innocent moment between two people. On the other hand, there was the reality of what she had just revealed to him. Zeira was not just a woman in need of affection. She was a leader, a political figure with responsibilities that Aiden could hardly fathom. I never imagined. Aiden muttered, his voice trailing off. This is bigger than I thought. This isn't just about us, is it? No, it's not, Zeira replied, her voice steady, but heavy with the burden of her position. It never was. And that's why it's so complicated. We're not just dealing with love here, Aiden. We're dealing with politics, with diplomacy. The weight of an entire people's future is on my shoulders, and I cannot afford to make any mistakes. Especially not with you. Aiden turned away from her, walking slowly toward one of the tall windows that overlooked the expansive Veyrithian city below. The landscape was breathtaking: green hills, towering spires, and intricate buildings that seemed to defy gravity. Yet none of it brought him any comfort in that moment. His gaze was distant, as though he were looking not just at the city, but at the enormity of the situation unfolding before him. I'm not sure I can be a part of this, he said quietly, the weight of his words sinking in. I'm a soldier, Zeira. My loyalty is to Earth, to humanity. I can't just throw all of that away because of a promise I made when I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what you were really asking for. Zeira's silence lingered for a moment before she stepped closer to him, her footsteps soft on the polished floor. I never asked you to throw away your loyalties, Aiden. I never asked you to abandon your duty. But the truth is, you're already involved. You've already made the choice whether you realize it or not. This is no longer just about us. Her voice softened as she continued. You can walk away if you want. You can turn your back on me, on Veyrith, on everything we stand for. But know this, if you do, it will be the end of something much greater than just us. And I don't know if either of us will be able to live with that. The words hit Aiden like a hammer, each one more forceful than the last. She was right. He couldn't just walk away. He couldn't ignore the implications of his actions, the far-reaching consequences that would ripple through both the human and Veyrithian civilizations. His heart told him to hold on to his morals, his ideals. But his mind told him that duty to his people, to the galaxy, came first. I don't know what to do, Aiden admitted, his voice thick with uncertainty. You've put me in a position I never expected. I can't just abandon my principles, but I can't ignore what you're asking either. Zeira placed a hand gently on his arm, her touch surprisingly tender. You don't have to decide right now. But know this, Aiden, I need you more than you could ever understand. And so does Veyrith. We're in this together, whether you like it or not. Aiden closed his eyes, trying to quiet the storm of emotions that raged within him. He had made a promise long ago, but now it felt like that promise had grown into something much larger, something that neither of them could fully comprehend. The choices ahead were no longer simple, and the path forward seemed fraught with conflict. He didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his decisions more than ever before. The weight of Zeira's words hung in the air, thick with meaning, as Aiden stood silently beside her. She was right, of course. This wasn't just about a promise anymore. It was about politics, about the future of not just two individuals, but entire civilizations. As much as Aiden wanted to deny it, his life was no longer just his own. His ties to Earth and to Zeira were becoming increasingly complex, tangled in a web of political maneuvering, power struggles, and looming threats. Days had passed since their conversation, and Aiden could feel the atmosphere shifting, becoming heavier, more charged. He had hoped to return to his duties as a Starfleet officer to focus on his mission, but the presence of Zeira and the weight of their shared history refused to leave his thoughts. Worse still, the people around him seemed to sense the changes, and those who had once welcomed him with open arms now watched him with wary eyes. Aiden had spent years navigating the dangerous waters of intergalactic diplomacy, but this situation was different. Zeira's position, her very existence as the heir to the Veyrithian throne, had now placed him at the center of a storm, one that no one had prepared him for. Her people saw her as a symbol of hope and strength, and their future hinged on her ability to maintain control over the political landscape. But what would happen if she chose to marry a human, someone from a distant, newly integrated world? What would it mean for the fragile alliances that were just beginning to form? The most troubling part was that they weren't the only ones who had noticed. Aiden walked through the long corridors of the Veyrithian palace, his footsteps echoing off the gleaming stone floors. The once quiet halls now felt full of whispers, and the air seemed thick with tension. It was only a matter of time before the political leaders of Veyrith would weigh in, and soon he would find himself caught in a battle between love and duty, between personal desires and galactic obligations. He found himself in a large meeting room where diplomats from various systems had gathered to discuss the growing tensions between Veyrith and neighboring worlds. He was supposed to sit in as an observer, a neutral party to keep the peace. But even as the discussions began, Aiden could sense the eyes that lingered on him, not just the Veyrithian officials, but representatives from other worlds as well. The door opened and Zeira entered, her regal presence commanding immediate attention. Her beauty and poise were still as striking as ever, but it was her expression, serious and resolute, that drew all eyes to her. She moved toward the front of the room, standing tall beside the Veyrithian council members. There was no longer any trace of the playful girl who had once asked him to marry her. In her place stood a leader, one who carried the weight of an entire civilization on her shoulders. Aiden felt a pang in his chest. He had always known she was important, but now seeing her as the symbol of Veyrith's future, the gravity of the situation truly sank in. "Thank you all for gathering," Zeira said, her voice carrying across the room, strong and measured. "As you know, we are here to discuss the future of Veyrith within the Galactic Alliance. But before we begin, I must address something of great personal significance." She turned her gaze to Aiden, and for a moment their eyes met, a silent exchange of unspoken understanding. The room fell into a tense silence as the implications of her words hit everyone like a thunderclap. Aiden felt the eyes of the room turn toward him, their gaze both curious and suspicious. He had no doubt that rumors had already spread about their connection, but now Zeira was bringing it into the open. "I am aware that my relationship with Commander Aiden Cross has become a subject of great interest," she continued, her voice unwavering. "Some of you may see this as an opportunity to strengthen the ties between Veyrith and Earth, while others may view it as a threat to the delicate balance of power. I understand the concerns of all of you." Aiden's stomach tightened. He had never been one for politics, had never wanted to be at the center of such a controversy. He had always seen himself as a soldier, a protector, someone who followed orders and did his job. But now that sense of purpose seemed to slip further away with every passing second. The first to speak was an older Veyrithian diplomat, a man whose name Aiden couldn't quite recall. His voice was low, but his words were sharp. "Your Highness, we understand the importance of alliances, but we must ask ourselves, what will it mean for Veyrith if our heir becomes so closely tied to a foreign power? What message does it send to the other systems? Will our sovereignty be compromised? Will we become subjugated to Earth's influence?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Aiden could feel the weight of their words like a physical force pressing down on him. He had always known there were risks to this alliance, but hearing it out loud, the doubts, the fear made it all the more real. Zeira didn't flinch, her gaze unyielding. "This is not a question of loyalty or weakness. This is a question of trust. Trust in the people we choose to ally with, trust in the promise of peace, and trust that we can forge a future where we are not defined by our differences, but by our shared values. Earth is not our enemy, and Commander Aiden Cross is not a pawn. he is an ally. There was a sharp intake of breath from the room as if no one had expected Zeira to speak so plainly, so forcefully. She was no longer the child asking for a promise. She was the ruler, and her words carried the weight of that authority. But she continued, I understand that not all of you see it this way. There are others among us who believe that Veyrith should not rely on outside forces, that we should not allow our future to be dictated by those who do not understand our ways. To them I say this, we have always faced adversity from within and from without. If we are to survive, we must be strong enough to build bridges, not walls. Aiden's chest tightened as the conversation shifted the room, filling with murmurs of dissent and agreement. His heart raced caught between the conflicting forces of duty and love. He could see the tension in Zeira's posture, the way her hands were clasped tightly before her fingers betraying a nervousness she was trying to mask. The debate continued, each voice contributing to the growing rift between the factions in the room. It was clear that this was not just a debate over alliances, it was a debate over the future of Veyrith itself. Zeira's position as heir and the potential alliance with Earth had become the fulcrum on which the fate of the planet teetered. Aiden remained silent, feeling more and more like an outsider in a room filled with people whose stakes were far higher than his own. He was no longer just an observer. His presence here, his connection to Zeira, had turned him into a political pawn, a symbol of something far larger than he could comprehend. And as the meeting continued, Aiden realized that this was only the beginning. The forces aligned against them were powerful, and the path ahead would not be easy. He had promised to stand by Zeira, but he wasn't sure anymore whether that promise was enough to withstand the political pressures that were now mounting on all sides. Aiden paced back and forth in his quarters, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. The long expanse of space stretched out beyond the viewport stars twinkling in the distance, a silent reminder of how far he had come. Yet in this moment the stars seemed distant, cold, even mocking him. His mind was a battlefield torn between conflicting desires. On one hand, there was Zeira, the woman who had once been a child, a symbol of innocence and promises. Now she was a ruler, a leader of Veyrith, and a symbol of power. Her beauty, her strength, and her unwavering determination were irresistible to him. He had promised to stand by her side, and in his heart he felt the pull of that promise. But on the other hand, there was his duty to Earth, to humanity, to the greater galaxy. He was an officer, a soldier, trained to think logically, to follow orders, and protect the interests of his people. And now, standing between love and duty, Aiden was lost. He had always been able to compartmentalize his emotions, but this was different. His feelings for Zeira were not something he could simply push aside. They were real, they were strong. But could he allow himself to prioritize them over everything he had been trained to do? Could he risk everything, not just his career, but the stability of the galaxy for a relationship that might tear apart the delicate balance between civilizations? A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Aiden turned toward it, startled, though he had known it was coming. He opened the door to find Tana, his longtime friend and fellow officer, standing there. Tana's face was calm, but there was a knowing look in his eyes, as if he understood exactly what Aiden was going through. "You're still awake," Tana said quietly, stepping into the room. "I thought I'd find you here." Aiden didn't answer immediately. He simply closed the door behind Tana and leaned against the wall, his gaze lingering on the stars outside. "I can't stop thinking about her," Aiden finally muttered. "About us. About everything." Tana raised an eyebrow, his posture relaxed but his expression serious. "You mean Zeira?" Aiden nodded. "I don't know what to do, Tana. Every day I feel like I'm pulled in two directions. I made a promise to her, but I also made a commitment to humanity. I'm part of something bigger than just myself, and if I let my personal feelings get in the way, it could destroy everything." Tana walked over to the window, glancing out at the stars before turning to face Aiden. "You're not the only one caught in the middle, you know. The Veyrithians' Earth. They both have their eyes on you now. Your relationship with her is more than just a personal matter. It's political, and it's going to change the course of the future for both sides." "I know," Aiden sighed. "I never imagined things would get this complicated. She's not just a woman I made a promise to. She's the heir to the throne of Veyrith. And if I do this, if I follow through, I'm not just choosing her. I'm choosing to risk everything. the stability of Earth, the future of all of us. Tana paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. You're not the only one with a responsibility here. Zeira has her own burdens. She's the future of her people. And if she chooses you, she's not just choosing love. She's choosing a path that could change everything for Veyrith. For the galaxy. Aiden let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair. I know, I understand that. But how can I balance my feelings for her with the fact that I might be jeopardizing the future of Earth? How can I be the man she needs and still be the officer my people need? Tana's voice softened, and for the first time, Aiden saw something close to empathy in his friend's eyes. You're not expected to have all the answers. Nobody expects that of you. But you have to make a choice. The right choice. It's not just about duty, Aiden. It's about what you're willing to stand for. What kind of future do you want, and who do you want to be in that future? Aiden turned toward him, his expression a mix of frustration and desperation. I don't know. I don't know what the right choice is. I'm afraid that whatever I do, someone will lose. Someone will suffer. And I don't know if I can live with that. Tana stepped closer, placing a hand on Aiden's shoulder. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones we can't make alone. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself. Aiden looked at his friend, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time, he felt the crushing reality of his situation. Zeira was not just a promise from the past. She was a living, breathing force of nature, a leader with the power to shape the future. And Aiden's heart told him that he couldn't turn his back on her, even if it meant defying his own people. But his mind told him that doing so could have consequences far beyond anything he could imagine. Just as the silence grew heavy between them, the door opened again. Zeira stood there, her violet eyes locking onto Aiden's with a quiet intensity. She had entered without knocking, but in this moment there was no need for permission. She was a queen in her own right, and this was her world. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said softly, though there was no mistaking the strength in her voice. But I think we need to talk. Aiden's heart skipped a beat, and Tana, sensing the tension, quietly excused himself, leaving the room with a brief nod to both of them. Zeira stepped inside, her gaze never leaving Aiden's. I know you're torn, Aiden. I can see it in your eyes. You don't know what to do, and you're afraid of what your decision might cost. Aiden swallowed his throat dry. I don't know if I can keep my promise, Zeira. I don't know if I can follow through with this with you and still protect everything I'm supposed to protect. My duty, it's always been my first priority. I can't just throw that away. Zeira's expression softened, and she stepped closer, her presence calming in a way that made Aiden's heart ache. I don't want you to throw away anything, Aiden. I don't want you to lose yourself. But I need you to understand, this isn't just about us. It's about the future. It's about building something new, something that could unite our worlds. And I can't do that alone. Her voice wavered for the briefest of moments, a crack in her otherwise unshakable exterior. I need you, Aiden, not just because of a promise, but because together we can change the future. But only if you stand by me, only if you choose us, together. Aiden closed his eyes, her words wrapping around him like chains. The weight of the galaxy was heavy on his shoulders, and he didn't know how much longer he could carry it. But in that moment, with Zeira standing before him, Aiden realized that the real battle wasn't with his duty nor his promise. It was with his own heart. And no matter what choice he made, it would define him forever. The sun hung low over the horizon of Veyrith, casting a soft golden hue over the vast landscapes below. The palace grounds were quiet except for the distant hum of machinery and the occasional bird call echoing through the air. Aiden stood at the edge of the balcony looking out at the sprawling city below. His mind was still clouded by his earlier conversation with Zeira, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the path they were on was far more dangerous than he had originally anticipated. He had always known Zeira was strong-willed, strong in conviction, strong in leadership. But what he hadn't fully understood until now was the depth of her responsibility. She wasn't just a woman he had once promised to marry. She wasn't just someone he had come to love. She was Veyrith's future, the heir to a throne that carried the weight of her entire people on her shoulders. And now their relationship, their connection had become a symbol of peace between their two civilizations. Yes, but also a symbol of power. It was a connection that could unite or destroy them both, depending on how it was handled. The tension in the air was palpable, and every decision they made, every action they took, was watched closely by those who would either seek to exploit it or tear them apart. Aiden's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching behind him. He turned to find Zeira walking toward him, her posture as commanding as ever. She moved with the grace of someone born into power, but her eyes, those deep violet eyes, held something softer, something that caught Aiden off guard every time they locked gazes. "I thought I'd find you here," she said, her voice soft but firm, carrying the weight of someone who had learned to be both compassionate and unyielding. Aiden gave her a half smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't mean to leave you alone for so long. I just needed a little time to think." Zeira stood beside him at the balcony, her eyes following the same horizon as his. For a moment, neither of them spoke, but the silence was different now, charged with the understanding that their future was tied to the decisions they would make together. "You've been thinking a lot lately," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "I can see it in your eyes." Aiden exhaled slowly, letting the cool evening air wash over him. "I'm torn, Zeira. I don't know what the right decision is anymore. I promised you I'd stand by you, but it's more than just a promise now. It's politics, it's our futures, it's everything." Zeira turned to him, her gaze steady and piercing. "I know. I'm not blind to what's at stake. This is bigger than just us. But I'm not asking you to make a decision out of obligation. I'm asking you to choose because it's what you want, because you believe in it." Aiden felt a pang of uncertainty. "But if I choose you, if I choose this, it's not just about us. It's about the entire galaxy. Earth and Veyrith both have their interests in this. Our relationship could change everything, and I don't know if I'm ready for that." Zeira stepped closer, her presence commanding and comforting all at once. "I wasn't ready either, Aiden. I didn't ask for any of this. But the truth is, I can't do this alone. I never could. I've spent my life preparing to lead my people, but the weight of it, it's unbearable. You think I'm strong because of my position, but I carry this burden every single day alone." Aiden's chest tightened as he listened to her, hearing the vulnerability beneath her confident words. He had always admired her strength, but in that moment he saw the cost it had taken. He had no idea what it was like to have the fate of an entire civilization on his shoulders. "I can't imagine the pressure you're under," Aiden said, his voice quieter now. "I see the way you carry yourself, the way everyone looks at you. But I'm afraid that if we choose this, we'll be torn apart by forces we can't control." Zeira's eyes softened, and for a moment she reached out, placing her hand on his. Her touch was warm, grounding him, reminding him that she wasn't just the future of Veyrith. She was a woman with hopes, fears, and desires just like him. "I know the risks, Aiden, but I can't let fear control us. I can't let the politics of it all stop me from wanting what's right. And what's right for me is you. I don't need a king, Aiden. I need an equal. I need someone who will stand by me, who will help me bear this weight. Together we can make a future where peace isn't just an ideal, but a reality." Aiden stared at her hand on his, feeling the warmth of her touch seep into him. His heart thundered in his chest as the weight of her words settled over him. She was asking him not just for his loyalty, she was asking him for his trust, his belief in what they could build together. "I don't know what's going to happen, Zeira," Aiden said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm here. I'm here with you." Zeira smiled, and the fierceness in her expression softened, replaced with a tenderness that made Aiden's heart ache. "That's all I need to hear," she whispered. But even as the words left her lips, Aiden could feel the tension in the air, the weight of their situation, the pressure of the forces that sought to control them. Zeira was no longer just a woman he loved. She was the future of a planet, the heir to a throne that demanded loyalty and strength. Every step they took, every decision they made would echo through the corridors of history, shaping the future of their people and of the galaxy. As they stood together side by side, the promise of peace between their civilizations felt within reach. But Aiden knew that peace was fragile, and the road ahead would not be easy. He wasn't just fighting for a relationship anymore. He was fighting for a future where love and duty could coexist, where two different worlds could come together without destroying each other. And as much as Aiden wanted to believe in that future, he knew it would come at a cost. Zeira was not just the woman he loved. She was a leader, a ruler who had a duty far greater than anything he had ever known. Their relationship had become both a symbol of hope and a weapon in the ongoing battle for control. He only hoped that the path they were walking would lead to a future where they both could thrive, not just survive. The atmosphere in the Veyrithian palace had grown tense in recent days. The meeting rooms were filled with hushed conversations, and the halls were buzzing with anticipation. The political implications of Aiden's presence on Veyrith and his connection to Zeira had become the subject of fierce debate. The future of the planet hung in the balance, and for Zeira, it was not just about a relationship, it was about her responsibility to her people. Aiden knew he was part of something much larger now, something that was beyond his understanding. And though he had promised to stand by Zeira, there were forces much more powerful than his love for her that sought to pull them apart. That was where Tholen came in. Tholen was Veyrith's most trusted political counselor, a man of wisdom and experience who had served the royal family for decades. He was a man of sharp intellect, always calculating, always thinking several steps ahead. But what Aiden had come to realize was that Tholen's loyalty to Zeira was not only political. There was a genuine care, a deep understanding of the burden she bore. However, Tholen's role was not without conflict. The political landscape of Veyrith was fraught with factions that sought to control its future, and Zeira's choice to be with Aiden only added fuel to the fire. Aiden found himself summoned to a private meeting with Tholen in one of the palace's quieter chambers. The room was dimly lit with a large map of Veyrith stretched out across the table. Various political districts and regions were marked in bright colors, each one representing a different faction or power struggle. The map seemed almost like a battlefield, a place where alliances were forged and broken in an instant. When Aiden entered, Tholen was already standing by the table examining the map with a thoughtful expression. His dark graying hair and sharp features made him appear older than he truly was, but there was a light in his eyes that never dulled. He looked up as Aiden stepped into the room, his expression neutral, but his gaze piercing. Commander Cross, Tholen said, his voice steady and composed as always. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Aiden nodded and took a seat across from him, glancing at the map but feeling out of place. He had never been particularly good at navigating political landscapes, and now more than ever, he realized just how much he had to learn. "I'm listening," Aiden said, his voice tense. "What's going on, Tholen? I'm trying to understand everything, but it feels like every decision we make just makes things worse." Tholen let out a small sigh, his fingers brushing across the surface of the map. "The situation is delicate, Commander. Veyrith is a planet of many factions, each with their own vision of how things should be. There are those who see Zeira's relationship with you as a symbol of unity and hope, and then there are those who view it as a threat to our sovereignty." Aiden furrowed his brow. "But we're talking about peace, aren't we? This could unite Earth and Veyrith. Why would anyone be against that?" Tholen gave him a long, hard look before replying. "Peace is never as simple as it seems. The balance of power on Veyrith is fragile. There are traditionalists who believe that Veyrith should remain isolated, that alliances with outsiders, especially with a species like humans, weaken us. They fear that the influence of Earth could undermine our culture, our identity." Aiden leaned forward, his frustration growing. "So they'd rather see everything fall apart than let Veyrith evolve. This is about fear, isn't it? Fear of change, fear of what we could become together." Tholen's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "It's not just about fear. It's about power, Aiden, and control. Veyrith has been a dominant force in this part of the galaxy for centuries. Many believe that to remain strong, we must preserve our traditions. And when someone like you, a human, enters the picture, it challenges everything they've built. For them, peace may not be worth the price of losing their influence." Aiden's mind raced. "So it's not just about me and Zeira, is it? It's about the entire political system of Veyrith." "Exactly," Tholen replied, his voice quieter now. "Zeira has inherited not just a throne, but a legacy that comes with its own set of expectations, its own set of pressures. And your relationship with her, though it may seem like a personal matter, has become a political statement. It's a symbol, Aiden, a symbol that some are desperate to control." Aiden took a deep breath, trying to process everything Tholen was saying. The weight of the situation seemed to grow heavier with each word. It wasn't just his love for Zeira that was at stake. It was the very future of two worlds, two civilizations. You knew all this, didn't you? Aiden said, looking up at Tholen, his voice laced with a mix of curiosity and frustration. You knew the political fallout would be massive, and you've been guiding Zeira through all of this. But how can she make the right decision if everyone's pulling her in different directions? Tholen gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I've been advising Zeira for years, but the choices she faces now are unlike any she's encountered before. The pressure on her is immense. She cannot simply ignore the needs of her people, the stability of Veyrith, and the expectations placed upon her. Yet at the same time, she cannot disregard the possibility of a better future. A future where alliances are not made through fear, but through trust. Aiden clenched his fists, his jaw tight. I just want to be with her, to support her. But every time we take a step forward, it feels like we're being dragged back. That's because the forces opposing you are relentless, Tholen said, his tone hardening slightly. They will not stop until they have either driven a wedge between you or forced Zeira to choose a path that suits their agenda. But what you have to understand, Commander, is that this is not just about love. It is about destiny. And Zeira's destiny is not only to rule Veyrith, but to shape the future of all who follow her. She needs you, yes, but she also needs to navigate the complexities of her position. Aiden looked at Tholen, seeing the concern etched on his face. And what if her position isn't enough? What if the political pressure is too much for her to bear? Tholen's eyes darkened, a flicker of uncertainty passing through them. Then she will have to make the hardest decision of her life, and so will you. Aiden sat in silence, the weight of Tholen's words sinking in. This was no longer just about a promise made to a child. This was about survival, about the future of two worlds on the brink of change. And somehow he was right in the middle of it all. Thank you, Tholen, Aiden said, his voice low and filled with a new understanding. I didn't fully realize how much was at stake. Tholen nodded, his face softening slightly. You're not alone in this, Commander. You may feel like an outsider, but your actions will shape the future just as much as Zeira's. You both have a role to play in what comes next. Just remember, whatever happens, you must stay true to yourselves. The rest will follow. As Aiden stood to leave, he felt the weight of Tholen's words pressing on him. The choices ahead were monumental. But no matter what he knew, one thing for sure, this was a fight for more than just love. It was a fight for the future of two civilizations, and the decisions they made would echo for generations. The tension in the air seemed to grow thicker with each passing day, like a storm on the horizon, ready to break. Aiden had been so focused on navigating his own emotions and political entanglements that he hadn't fully grasped the full scope of the forces at play. There was more than just politics at work here. There were deeper, darker currents moving behind the scenes, and not all of them were looking to preserve peace. As Aiden sat in his quarters staring at the holographic map of Veyrith and Earth, a constant reminder of the fragile balance he was trying to protect, he heard the familiar knock on his door. Without waiting for permission, the door slid open, revealing his closest friend and ally, Tana. Tana was a longtime friend of Aiden's, a fellow officer in Starfleet, and one of the few people Aiden trusted completely. Tana had been by his side through countless missions, always the voice of reason and practicality. His quick wit, sharp mind, and unshakable loyalty had made him one of the few people Aiden could rely on when everything else seemed uncertain. Aiden had always appreciated Tana's calm demeanor, especially in moments like this, when the weight of the galaxy seemed to be pressing down on him. Hey, you look like you've been running a marathon, Tana said, stepping inside with his usual easy smile. Though Aiden could tell his friend was just as weighed down by the situation as he was, or at least thinking through it. Aiden's shoulders slumped as he gestured to the seat next to him. You can say that again. It feels like I'm stuck in a maze that keeps changing. Every time I think I've found a way out, there's another obstacle. Tana chuckled, settling into the chair. That's politics for you. And I know this is more than politics. You're torn between what you feel for Zeira and your loyalty to Earth. You can't ignore either one. But I need to know, Aiden, what's your gut telling you? Aiden stared out the window, watching the stars flicker like distant beacons. My gut. It tells me I'm in way over my head. I'm not just fighting for her, Tana. I'm fighting for the future of both of our worlds. And no matter what we do, there are those who want to control the narrative, use us for their own gain. Tana leaned forward, his voice serious. And that's where Ronan comes in, isn't it? Aiden's eyes narrowed at the mention of the name. Ronan was a figure shrouded in mystery, a leader of the extremist faction that had been gaining influence in the shadows. The faction known as the Veyrithian Purity Movement was led by Ronan, a charismatic but dangerous individual who believed that Veyrith should remain isolated and cut off from the rest of the galaxy. His followers were a mix of hardliners and traditionalists who feared the influence of Earth and other alien civilizations, seeing them as a threat to Veyrith's purity and sovereignty. Ronan's faction had been quietly rallying support in the background, using fear and manipulation to turn people against Zeira's alliance with humanity. Yeah, Aiden muttered, the bitterness in his voice evident. He's been a thorn in our side since the start. I've never trusted him, but now it's worse. He's using our relationship to rally his followers, claiming that Veyrith will fall if we continue to align ourselves with humans. He's pushing for something much darker. Tana leaned forward, his expression hardening. He knows how to play the game. He's using Zeira's position to stir up the kind of fear that makes people act irrationally. But what he doesn't realize is that Zeira's not a pawn. She's a queen, and no matter what, she won't be swayed. Aiden shook his head, feeling a deep frustration. She's strong, Tana. I know that. But the weight of everything is getting to her. She's caught between wanting peace and wanting to protect her people. If Ronan succeeds, everything we've worked for will crumble. That's why we need to stop him, Tana said, his voice firm. But we can't do it alone. You have to trust the people around you. We're not just fighting for Veyrith anymore. We're fighting for all of us. Before Aiden could respond, the door to the quarters opened again this time, revealing a tall, imposing figure in the doorway. It was Ronan. His presence alone was enough to make the room feel smaller, colder. The air seemed to thicken as he stepped into the room, his eyes locked onto Aiden's, with a look that could have frozen a sun. Ronan stood at the threshold, his tall, muscular frame casting a shadow across the room. His dark hair and piercing green eyes gave him an intimidating presence, and his sharp features made him look like a man who had spent years maneuvering through political intrigue. Ronan's charisma was undeniable, and he was known for his ability to rally those around him with passionate speeches and promises of a pure Veyrith. Isn't it a little late for a chat? Commander Ronan's voice was smooth like a knife being sharpened against stone. Or are you too busy with your new friends to notice what's really happening around here? Aiden stood up, his jaw tightening. What do you want, Ronan? The man's lips curled into a slight smirk as he glanced at Tana, who stood up as well, positioning himself slightly in front of Aiden. I think you know exactly what I want. I'm here to talk about the future, your future, Veyrith's future, and whether or not you're truly committed to it. Tana didn't move, but his voice was laced with warning. We've been through this, Ronan. If you think you can use Aiden's relationship with Zeira to create more chaos, you're wrong. Ronan's eyes flickered with amusement. Chaos. No. I'm not interested in chaos, Tana. I'm interested in control. Veyrith doesn't need to be tied to Earth to humans. We don't need outsiders to survive. But you, Commander Cross, you're already in too deep. You've let your emotions blind you. You've made a promise to a woman who doesn't understand the true cost of what you're getting involved in. And now the whole galaxy will suffer for it. Aiden took a step forward, his fist clenched. You don't know what you're talking about, Ronan. This isn't about control. It's about peace. We're not trying to dominate anyone. We're trying to unite. Ronan chuckled darkly, his eyes never leaving Aiden's. Unite. You're playing into the hands of forces far more powerful than you understand. If you don't stand with us, you're standing against us. And I promise you, Commander, when the time comes, you'll regret your choice. Aiden's anger flared, but Tana placed a hand on his shoulder, holding him back. We're done here, Ronan. You've made your point. But remember this, you can't force people to follow you by using fear. We stand for something better than that. Ronan's smirk faltered, and for a brief moment there was a flicker of frustration in his eyes. We'll see how long that optimism lasts, he said before turning sharply on his heel and leaving the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Aiden let out a breath. He didn't realize he was holding his muscles still tense. I don't get it, Tana. How can he think this way? He's willing to tear everything apart just to maintain control. Tana shook his head, his expression grim. It's not just about control, Aiden. It's about fear. Fear of change, fear of losing power. Ronan doesn't want to admit that the galaxy is moving forward. He wants to keep it the way it's always been, with Veyrith at the top, and he'll stop at nothing to make sure that happens. Aiden looked out the window, his gaze fixed on the stars once again. He had no idea how this would all play out, but one thing was certain: Ronan was not going to give up easily. And neither would he. "I won't let him win," Aiden said quietly, his voice full of resolve. "Not now, not ever." Tana placed a hand on his friend's shoulder, offering silent support. "We'll stand with you, Aiden. You're not alone in this." For the first time in days, Aiden felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead was unclear, and the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. But as long as he had allies like Tana by his side, and the strength of his love for Zeira, he would fight until the very end. The quiet murmur of the city below Veyrith's towering spires had always been a comfort to Zeira, a reminder of the stability her people had fought so hard to maintain. But tonight the stars above seemed less like beacons of hope and more like the distant eyes of unseen watchers. Every move she made, every word spoken, every decision seemed to carry weight not just for her, but for the entire galaxy. As she stood in the privacy of her chambers, her hand resting gently on the small bump that had begun to show, Zeira felt the reality of the situation pressing down on her. The child she was carrying, the child that Aiden and she had spoken of in hushed tones, dreams of a peaceful future, was more than just a symbol of their love. It was far more than a mere child. It was the key to something much larger, something that could shift the very balance of the universe. Yet this gift, this potential for hope and unity, was now the focus of darker forces. Forces that had quietly waited in the shadows, watching and planning, ready to exploit whatever they could for their own gain. And those forces had begun to stir, moving closer to Veyrith, to Aiden and to Zeira herself. Zeira's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at her door. She turned to see Aiden standing there, his eyes filled with concern. He had been unusually quiet for the past few days, his mind clearly preoccupied with the pressure of their situation. But tonight his gaze was sharper, more focused. "Zeira," he said quietly, stepping inside, his voice low with urgency. "We need to talk. There's something you need to know." Zeira closed the distance between them, her heart quickening in her chest. "What is it, Aiden?" Aiden's expression darkened as he looked at her, taking a deep breath before speaking. "It's about the child and what's been happening behind the scenes. There's an organization, a shadow faction, a group we thought had been long gone. They're back and they're moving. They know about the baby." Zeira's heart stopped. "What do you mean they know about the baby? How could they possibly?" Aiden's voice grew more intense, his concern evident in every word. "They've been tracking us for weeks now. They've infiltrated several levels of Veyrith's political structure, and now they're moving to exploit the child. They believe it's the key to changing the entire balance of power in the galaxy." Zeira felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known that her bloodline carried power, that her role as the heir to Veyrith's throne made her a target. But the child growing inside her, a symbol of unity, peace, and a future without war, had never been something she thought could be used for destruction. "What do they want with the baby?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. Aiden stepped closer to her, his eyes hard with resolve. "They believe the child has the potential to unlock something. Something from the ancient Veyrithian technology, a power that could alter the course of the universe. If they control the child, they believe they can control the future, and they'll stop at nothing to get their hands on it." Zeira's hand instinctively went to her stomach, as if protecting the life inside her. "We can't let them have the baby. Aiden, we can't let them use it for their own ends." "I know," Aiden said firmly, "but we can't do this alone. We need to act fast or they'll have the advantage. They're already making moves." Zeira nodded, her mind racing. The implications were staggering. Whoever controlled her child would hold the power to reshape the galaxy, to either bring peace or plunge it into chaos. And the organization that had its eyes on her unborn child was not a small group. They were powerful, hidden in the shadows, and dangerous beyond measure. Aiden placed his hand on hers, his grip steady. "We're going to protect this child, Zeira. We'll keep them safe. But we need to be smart about this. We can't let them get the upper hand. We have to stay one step ahead." Zeira looked into his eyes, a deep fear mixed with a fierce determination. "What are we going to do? How do we fight an enemy we can't even see?" "We start by gathering allies," Aiden said, his voice resolute. "We can't fight this war alone. We need the Veyrithian loyalists, the ones who truly want peace, and we need Earth's resources. Together we can stop them before they get any closer." Zeira's mind was working in overdrive. She had to think not just as a woman, but as the ruler of Veyrith. The child she carried could either bring about a new era of peace or become a tool of unimaginable destruction. The stakes had never been higher. But then, just as the weight of her responsibility seemed to overwhelm her, a voice broke through her thoughts. It was low, insidious, and unmistakable. "You're too late." Zeira and Aiden turned, their bodies tensing. Standing in the doorway was a figure cloaked in shadow, his presence suffocating, as if the air itself had thickened with his arrival. The man's dark eyes gleamed with malicious intent. Ronan. Aiden hissed his hand instinctively, moving to the sidearm at his hip. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ronan stepped forward, a smug smile curling on his lips. "I've come to offer you a choice, Commander Cross. You can fight this battle blindly, throwing your weight against a force you don't understand, or you can join me. Together we can unlock the true power of the Veyrithian legacy. Together we can reshape the galaxy." Zeira felt a surge of rage, her hand tightening around Aiden's. "You're insane. The child will never be used as your weapon, Ronan. You'll never control it." Ronan's smile only widened. "You misunderstand, Zeira. It's not about controlling the child. It's about embracing the power that lies within it. And whether you like it or not, you and I both know that the child is the key to the future. The only question is, will you be its master, or will you allow someone else to wield it?" Zeira took a step forward, her voice cold and unwavering. "We will fight you, Ronan, and we will win. The galaxy will not be ruled by fear and power-hungry factions like yours. We will protect the child and we will bring peace." Ronan's eyes flashed with cold amusement, but he said nothing more. Instead, he turned on his heel, his cloak swirling around him as he disappeared into the shadows, his presence still lingering in the air. Aiden and Zeira stood in silence, the weight of what had just transpired sinking in. Ronan had made his intentions clear. The dark forces were moving, and they were no longer just a distant threat. They were here in the heart of their world, watching and waiting. But then came the twist. Just as Ronan's figure had faded into the shadows, a new voice filled the room. A voice Zeira hadn't expected, one that made her blood run cold. "I think you misunderstand, Zeira." A second figure emerged from the darkness, stepping into the dim light. This one was even more menacing than Ronan, his face hidden beneath a hood. But the unmistakable gleam of recognition flickered in Aiden's eyes. This wasn't just a shadowy figure. It was someone they both knew, though neither expected him to be here. Ronan turned back from the doorway and shot the newcomer a glance. "Ah, so you've come to reveal the truth, haven't you?" Aiden's pulse quickened as the man stepped into the dim light. He recognized him immediately. Ronan was not just an enemy, but a figurehead for a deeper conspiracy. "You should have known," Zeira. Ronan spoke again, his voice laced with disdain. "You're not who you think you are." Zeira's mind raced. "What are you talking about?" she asked, feeling a chill in her spine. Ronan looked at her with something like pity. "Zeira, you're not from Veyrith," he said with finality. "You're the last descendant of the lost Veyrithian race, the creators of the ancient texts scattered across this galaxy. The child you carry, it's not just a symbol of unity, it's a weapon. And it's why you're being hunted by forces much older than you can imagine." Zeira staggered, her hand instinctively, clutching Aiden's arm as the weight of his words crashed over her. "No, that's impossible," she whispered, feeling everything she thought she knew about herself unravel. "The truth will come to light soon enough," Ronan said, his smirk deepening. "And you'll either join us in harnessing that power, or watch everything you love burn." Aiden's grip tightened on her shoulder, his voice filled with urgency. "We have to move, Zeira. Now. The child is the key to everything, and we can't let them use it to control the galaxy." Zeira's eyes locked onto Aiden's, the uncertainty in her heart replaced by a new sense of clarity. This battle was no longer just about her and Aiden. It was about their child and the future of the universe itself. "We fight, Aiden." Zeira whispered, determination hardening her voice. "We fight for the truth, and we protect the future, no matter the cost." The atmosphere in Veyrith's Grand Palace had never been more charged, the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on every soul in the room. Aiden stood beside Zeira, their fingers barely touching as they prepared for the most crucial decision of their lives. Their world was on the brink of collapse, their futures tied not just to each other, but to the entire balance of power across the galaxy. The choices they made now could either bring peace or trigger an irreversible conflict. Zeira looked out the massive windows, her gaze fixed on the vast city below. It was peaceful here, the night sky stretching endlessly above, as if oblivious to the turmoil she carried within. Her thoughts were consumed with the child she was carrying, a child who was both their hope and their greatest vulnerability. It was more than just a symbol of unity, it was the key to an ancient power that could either unify civilizations or tear them apart. Aiden stood silently beside her, his mind running through the consequences of every possible path they could take. He had spent most of his life fighting for peace, for the survival of humanity. But this was different. This wasn't just about two people or even two civilizations. This was about the future of everything. The future of their child, the future of Veyrith, the future of Earth and all the other worlds caught in the balance. "The pressure is unbearable, Zeira," whispered her voice, breaking the silence between them. She turned to Aiden, her eyes filled with the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was to come. "Everywhere I look, I see threats. The factions that want to tear us apart, the ones that want to use my child for their own ends. I don't know if I can make the right choice anymore." Aiden's heart ached as he watched her struggle. He knew what she was feeling. He was feeling it too. They had spent so much of their lives in the pursuit of duty, but now duty was not enough. Now they had to choose between the future of their relationship, the safety of their people, and the fate of their child. "We've already chosen Zeira," Aiden said softly, his voice steady, despite the chaos swirling around them. He took a step closer, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "We've chosen each other, but we also know that we can't ignore the reality of what we're facing. If we don't act carefully, everything we care about will be destroyed." Zeira's eyes filled with unshed tears, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a mountain. "You're right," she whispered. "We've already made our choice. But now we have to decide how to fight, how to protect what's ours, and how to ensure that this child doesn't become a tool of destruction." The door to the chamber creaked open, and they both turned to see Tholen standing in the doorway, his face a mixture of concern and determination. The political advisor had been by Zeira's side for years, guiding her through the complexities of Veyrithian politics. But even Tholen knew that what they were facing now was beyond anything he had ever encountered. "Your Highness Commander Cross," Tholen greeted, his voice low but firm. "The Council is waiting. The factions are becoming more divided by the hour. They're looking to you for leadership." Aiden exchanged a glance with Zeira, both of them feeling the weight of Tholen's words. The political situation was reaching a boiling point. Zeira was the rightful heir to Veyrith, but her relationship with Aiden and her pregnancy had become the focal point of a galaxy-wide debate. Would the child bring peace, or would it become the catalyst for a war that would sweep across the stars? "Tell them I'll be there soon," Zeira said, her voice resolute. "We need to address this head-on. The time for hesitation is over." Tholen gave a nod and stepped back, leaving them alone once again. The tension in the room thickened as Zeira turned to Aiden, her eyes searching his, looking for the strength they both needed to carry this burden. "I've always known what my duty was," Zeira said, her voice steady now. "I was born to lead, born to protect Veyrith, but I never imagined I'd have to choose between duty and love." Aiden reached for her hand, his grip warm and comforting. "And I never imagined I'd have to choose between my loyalty to Earth and my loyalty to you. But I know this, Zeira. Whatever happens, we face it together. Our love isn't just a personal matter anymore. It's a symbol. It's what we both fight for." She smiled faintly, the first real smile Aiden had seen from her in days. "You're right," she said softly. "We've built this future, Aiden. It's ours. We just need to decide how to protect it." The decision they faced now wasn't just about them. It was about the future of their people, the future of the galaxy, and the future of their child. The pressure was unlike anything they had ever experienced, and each decision they made would have consequences that would ripple through history. Zeira took a deep breath and straightened her posture, shifting from one of uncertainty to that of a leader. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "We need to stand before the council, before the people, and show them that we're united. We will not let fear or politics tear us apart. We will protect our child, and we will protect the future." Aiden nodded, his heart swelling with admiration for her strength. He had always known that Zeira was destined for greatness, but now he saw the full measure of that greatness. It wasn't just about leading, it was about protecting what mattered most, no matter the cost. Together they walked toward the council chambers, ready to face the political storm that awaited them. The weight of the galaxy was heavy on their shoulders, but they were no longer afraid. They had made their choice. Now it was time to face the consequences. As they entered the council chamber, the room fell silent, all eyes turning toward them. The various factions were gathered, their expressions a mixture of suspicion, fear, and anticipation. Zeira stepped forward, her voice strong as she addressed the room. "We are not here to choose sides," she began, her eyes sweeping over the gathered council members. "We are here to ensure that the future of Veyrith is one of peace. My child will not be used as a tool of power or destruction, and I will not allow fear or division to tear our people apart." The room was still for a moment before a voice from the back called out, its tone accusing and filled with doubt. "But what of the dangers?" the voice demanded. "What of the child's power? You're putting us all at risk." Zeira, a murmur of agreement swept through the room. Aiden could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of the decision, pushing them both closer to the edge. Zeira stood firm, her voice unwavering. "We have already faced the darkness, and we will face it again. But we do not face it alone. We face it together." Aiden's heart raced as the silence stretched on. This was it. Their future, the future of the galaxy, was in their hands now, and together they would fight for it. "Let us move forward," Zeira continued, her voice filled with authority. "For the child, for Veyrith, and for peace." The council members exchanged uncertain glances, but slowly, one by one, they began to nod in agreement. The decision had been made. For better or worse, the future had begun. The night had grown still, with the stars outside Veyrith's grand palace twinkling like distant beacons of hope. But inside, the atmosphere was heavy, charged with the weight of decisions yet to be made. Aiden stood at the edge of Zeira's chambers, looking out at the vast expanse of space beyond the palace walls, lost in thought. Despite everything they had accomplished, the alliances they had forged, the obstacles they had overcome, he couldn't shake the sense of impending danger that loomed over them. Their world, their love, and their future were all on the line. Zeira, as always, stood beside him, though she remained quiet, her hand resting lightly on her growing belly. The child she carried was more than just a symbol of their love. It was the key to a new future, a future that could either bring peace or tear the galaxy apart. Aiden could see the strain in her eyes, the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. She had never been just a princess. She was the future of her people, and every decision she made carried the weight of an entire civilization. Aiden's heart ached as he watched her. He had always known that Zeira was destined for greatness, but he had never truly understood the magnitude of that responsibility until now. The love they shared had been tested time and time again, but it had never felt more fragile, more precious than it did now. "We've come so far," Aiden said softly, breaking the silence between them. "But sometimes I wonder if it's enough. We've made so many sacrifices, Zeira, and there's more to come. I don't know how much more I can give." Zeira turned to him, her eyes filled with empathy and understanding. She stepped closer, placing her hand on his chest. "You've already given so much, Aiden, more than anyone could ever ask of you. But we both know that love isn't just about what we get, it's about what we give. And right now we have to give everything we have." Aiden met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to be at the center of this storm. I just wanted to be with you, to protect you." "I know," she whispered. "I never wanted it either. But this is our reality now. We've both chosen this path, chosen each other, and we have to stand by that choice even when it means making sacrifices." The truth of her words struck him deeply. They were standing on the precipice of something greater than either of them had ever imagined, and their love, as pure and strong as it was not enough to shield them from the forces that sought to tear them apart. It was a love that required more than just promises. It required sacrifice. It required courage. "I'd give anything for you," Aiden murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "But sometimes I feel like we're being pulled in different directions. I don't know how much longer I can keep balancing everything." Zeira's expression softened, and she placed her hands gently on either side of his face. "I understand, Aiden. But this is the price we pay. Love across the stars isn't just about the beauty of it. It's about the darkness we face together. It's about the sacrifices we make to ensure that the future we dream of, the future we believe in, becomes a reality. Aiden closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle deep within him. They were both on the edge of something immense, something that could change the course of their lives and the future of the galaxy. But love wasn't just about the moments of peace. It was about enduring the hardships, the trials, and the sacrifices that came with it. I never realized just how much I would have to give, Aiden admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to do it alone, Zeira said softly. We're in this together. We always have been. Aiden nodded, his heart swelling with both love and fear. The truth was, he didn't know how much more he could give, not just for Zeira, but for the galaxy. But in that moment, as he held her, he knew that there was no turning back. They had made a choice, and whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Promise me something, Aiden said, his voice rough with emotion. What is it? Zeira asked, her brow furrowing in concern. Promise me that we will never lose sight of each other. Promise me that no matter what happens, we will always have each other. Zeira smiled, the weight of their shared responsibility heavy in her eyes, but her love for him shining through. I promise, Aiden, we will always have each other, no matter what. It was a promise that carried both love and the weight of the universe, a promise that would see them through the darkest of times. And as they stood together, holding on to each other for strength, they knew that the future they dreamed of was not just a distant hope. It was a reality that they could still fight for if they were willing to sacrifice everything. In the days that followed, the tension between political forces, the factions that vied for control of the child, and the external threats from Ronan and the shadow factions grew more intense. The choices they made would not just affect their love, but would shape the future of two worlds, their alliance, and the galaxy as a whole. But every night after the chaos of the day, Aiden and Zeira found solace in each other's arms. They were two people who had come from vastly different worlds, who had chosen to stand together despite the odds. And as they lay side by side, whispering promises of a future they were still determined to fight for, they knew that love, true love, meant more than just passion. It meant sacrifice. It meant standing firm in the face of adversity. It meant never giving up on each other, no matter how dark the world became. And in that quiet, fleeting moment, amidst the chaos of the universe, they knew they had something far stronger than any enemy. They had each other. The air in the royal chambers was thick with anticipation. The time had come. Zeira was ready to give birth to the child that had become both their hope and their greatest fear. Aiden stood beside her, his hand holding hers as she breathed through the pain. His eyes were filled with concern, but there was also something deeper, something that had been growing inside him since they first learned of the child's importance. The weight of the galaxy's future rested on this moment. The child was not just a symbol of their love, it was something much more. Stay with me, Zeira, whispered, her voice strained with the intensity of labor. Promise me you won't leave. Aiden squeezed her hand tighter. I'm not going anywhere, Zeira. I'll be here right beside you always. Her breathing quickened as the contractions became more intense. Her face, though drenched in sweat, remained determined, her eyes never leaving his. She was the heir to a powerful throne, but in this moment she was like any other mother, hoping for the safety of her child. As the final push came, a cry pierced the air, sharp and beautiful, full of life. The room fell into a stunned silence as the attendants carefully placed the child into Zeira's arms. It was a boy, and the first breath he took seemed to resonate with the promise of something far greater than just a newborn child. Zeira looked down at her son, tears filling her eyes. She had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was here, she felt both awe and fear. She could sense the power that lay within him. It was more than just his potential as a future leader of Veyrith. There was something ancient, something that had been hidden for generations. Aiden looked at their son, his heart swelling with pride and wonder. He had never imagined his life could change so completely. This child, their child, was not just the future of their people. He was the key to something that could either save or destroy them all. But as they held their son, a sense of dread lingered in the air. They knew that the child was not just a blessing, he was a target. Dark forces, ones they had been running from since the very moment of his conception, would stop at nothing to claim him. And now the child was more vulnerable than ever. Zeira turned to Aiden, her expression filled with fear and determination. We need to protect him, Aiden. No one can know the truth. Aiden's face tightened, understanding exactly what she meant. You mean about where he comes from? About who you really are? Zeira nodded, her grip on their son tightening. They can never know. If the truth gets out, if they learn who I truly am, they'll come for him. And if they do, everything will be lost. Aiden's brow furrowed as the pieces began to fall into place. He had known for some time that Zeira's true heritage was a mystery, that she wasn't entirely a Veyrith, but until now the full weight of it hadn't truly hit him. She had never revealed to him just how much danger she and their son would be in if their true origins were discovered. What does it mean? Zeira, Aiden asked quietly, his voice heavy with the gravity of the situation. What do you mean by the truth? Zeira looked up at him, her eyes filled with both sadness and resolve. I'm not Veyrithian, Aiden. I was never born here. I am the last descendant of the Veyrithians, an ancient race that predates Veyrith itself. My people created the technologies that the galaxy now uses, the very technologies that have kept the balance of power for centuries. But they are also the ones who hid the knowledge of this power, hiding it within the bloodlines. My child, our son, is the key to unlocking all of that. Aiden's eyes widened as the full weight of her words hit him. The child. He's not just the future of Veyrith. He's a weapon, a key. Zeira nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, but he's also the key to salvation. The power within him could stop the collapse of the galaxy. It could end the war and the chaos that's threatening to destroy everything we've worked for. But only if it's protected. Only if we keep him hidden, keep him safe. Aiden closed his eyes for a moment, the enormity of their situation crashing down on him. This wasn't just about political alliances or the future of two civilizations. This was about the survival of everything. And their son, the innocent child they had just brought into the world, was now the focus of a cosmic struggle for power. They'll come for him, won't they? Aiden asked softly, his voice filled with both fear and certainty. They already have, Zeira whispered, and we can't let them find him. Not now, not ever. Aiden turned to her, his jaw set with resolve. Then we do what we have to do. We protect him, and we protect you. Zeira's eyes shone with unshed tears as she looked at their son, her hand gently brushing his tiny head. I don't know how we can keep him safe, Aiden. There are forces at play that we don't even understand. Ronan, the others, they're all looking for him. They'll use anything they can to get to him. Aiden took a deep breath, his mind already spinning with plans. He had been through countless missions in the past facing enemies he couldn't defeat alone. But this was different. This was personal. This was about protecting the woman he loved and the child who would change the course of everything. We don't let them win, he said firmly. We find allies. We keep him hidden. And we fight to make sure he's safe. We'll do whatever it takes. Zeira nodded, her face a mask of determination. I won't let them take him. I won't let them use him as a weapon. He's not a tool for them to exploit. He's our son, and I'll protect him with everything I have. The room fell silent as they both stared down at the child in Zeira's arms. The weight of the galaxy's future hung in the air. They were no longer just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for something far greater than either of them had ever imagined. The child was the key to the future, to salvation, but he was also the most dangerous secret in the galaxy. And as long as they had breath in their bodies, Aiden and Zeira would protect him no matter the cost. As the first light of dawn began to break across the horizon, Aiden and Zeira knew the path ahead would be filled with danger, deception, and sacrifice. But they were ready, they had to be, for the future, for their son, and for the galaxy itself. The storm that had been brewing for so long finally broke. It was not a storm of weather or natural disaster, but a storm of force and power, a force that neither Aiden nor Zeira had ever imagined they would face. The forces that had been gathering in the shadows waiting to exploit the power of their child were now on the move. Ronan and his dark allies had come with the intention of taking what they believed to be their rightful prize. But this was no longer just about power. This was about ideals, about the very future of the galaxy. Zeira sat by the bedside, her body still recovering from the exhausting labor. She should have been resting, but there was no time. Not now. Her mind raced with thoughts of her son who slept peacefully in her arms. Her exhaustion was deep, but so was the need to stay alert. Aiden paced back and forth, his hands gripping the sides of the wall, his mind full of the decisions that had to be made. He had spent his life in the service of peace, but never had he felt the weight of responsibility this heavily. Not only was the future of Veyrith and Earth hanging in the balance, but the future of their son, their child, was at the core of everything. Aiden Zeira's voice was weak, but it was still strong enough to draw his attention. She looked up at him, her eyes burning with intensity despite her physical weakness. "We can't wait any longer. We need to act now." He stopped pacing and turned to face her. She was sitting up against the pillows, her face pale from the strain of childbirth, yet her gaze was sharp. The strength that had always defined her was still present, even in this vulnerable moment. "You're still recovering, Zeira. You're not strong enough for this," Aiden said, his voice filled with both concern and defiance. "You need to rest. I'll handle this. I can't let you risk yourself further." She shook her head, her expression hardening. "I'm the one who brought this child into the world. I'm the one who carried him, and now I'm the one who will protect him. We protect him together." Aiden knew there was no reasoning with her. Zeira was no longer just the heir to Veyrith. She was a mother, and that made her a force to be reckoned with. He knew that deep down she had to be part of this fight. But the sight of her still recovering from childbirth, her body weak and vulnerable, filled him with an overwhelming sense of dread. He didn't want her to fight in this battle, not when she was in such a fragile state. Before he could say anything else, the door to the room burst open and Tholen entered, his face grim, his eyes flashing with urgency. "Commander, Your Highness," he said, bowing respectfully before turning to them. "The situation has escalated. Ronan's forces have surrounded the palace. They're not just here for the child. They're here to wipe out everything we've worked for." Zeira's eyes widened, her breath quickening as she tried to rise from the bed. "We can't let them win. We can't let them take him." Aiden moved quickly to her side, offering her a hand to steady herself. Despite her exhaustion, she took it without hesitation, her determination unwavering. He helped her stand, her body weak beneath the weight of their child, but her resolve was unshakable. "We'll make our stand," Aiden said, his voice cold and firm. "We fought for this peace, and we won't let them take it from us. No matter what happens, we fight for our son and for the future." Tholen nodded, his face grim as he observed Zeira's condition. "I've already mobilized the loyalists. We will hold the line for as long as we can. But the forces we face, they're not just soldiers. They're fanatics willing to destroy anything that stands in their way." Zeira nodded firmly, her eyes locked onto Aiden's. "We don't have a choice. This fight is not just for Veyrith. It's for the entire galaxy. If Ronan gets his hands on our son, it's over." Aiden squeezed her hand, the weight of her words sinking in. He understood more than anyone the stakes of this battle. Their love had been tested in ways they never thought possible, but now it was being tested in its most ultimate form. They would face darkness, both external and internal, and only together could they hope to survive. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed outside the room. Tholen's eyes flicked to the door, his expression tight with urgency. "They're here." Aiden turned to Zeira, his gaze softening for just a moment. "Stay back, Zeira. I don't want you in the middle of this. I'll handle it. I swear I will protect both of you." She shook her head, her grip on their son tightening. "We are in this together, Aiden. I will not sit idly by while our son's future is decided by others." With a final nod, Aiden turned and followed Tholen down the long hallways of the palace, Zeira and their son's safety still at the forefront of his mind. The air was thick with the tension of impending war, the weight of their decisions pressing on every corner of their world. When they reached the main chamber, Aiden's gaze locked on the scene unfolding before them. Ronan's forces had already begun their assault, and the room was filled with chaos. Zeira's loyalists fought valiantly, but the odds were stacked against them. The sound of blasters and clashes of weapons rang through the air, the battle for the future of Veyrith and beyond now in full force. Aiden rushed into the fray, his mind focused only on one thing: protecting Zeira and their child. Every fiber of his being was consumed with the knowledge that if they lost this fight, everything would crumble. Their love, their future, their entire world was at risk. As the battle raged on, Aiden and Zeira fought side by side, their resolve unyielding even as the weight of the conflict threatened to break them. Zeira, despite her physical weakness, moved with a determination that was impossible to ignore. Her love for Aiden and their child fueled her, even when every step felt like a fight for survival. Hours passed, the battle becoming more intense, more brutal with each passing moment. Ronan's forces, led by the man who had once been a symbol of hope for some, had now turned into nothing more than agents of chaos and destruction. Finally, the moment came. Aiden and Zeira stood together, their backs against the wall, the child still protected in Zeira's arms. Ronan approached, his expression a twisted mask of ambition and disdain. "You fought well, Zeira," he said coldly, his eyes glinting with the hunger for power. "But it's over now. Your child is mine. You cannot protect him forever." Zeira stood tall, her expression fierce. "You will never control him, and you will never control me." The words struck him like a blow, and for a moment Ronan hesitated. The power he sought so desperately was not just a weapon, it was the heart of their future, the key to the universe itself. He stepped forward, but Aiden was faster. In one swift movement, he incapacitated Ronan's closest ally, the fight now truly between the two of them. Aiden's heart pounded in his chest, his pulse racing with the realization that this moment would define everything. He fought not just for survival, but for love, for peace, for everything they had worked for. In the final moments of the battle, as Ronan fell defeated by their combined strength and resolve, Aiden and Zeira stood side by side, weary, bruised, but victorious. Their child was safe for now. Zeira turned to Aiden, her face streaked with tears and dirt, but her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "We did it," she whispered. Aiden looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it together." And in that moment, as the galaxy stood on the brink of change, they knew the true battle had only just begun. Their love, their unwavering bond, was the ultimate weapon against all the darkness that lay ahead. The dust of the final battle had barely settled before Aiden and Zeira began to see the path ahead clearly. The galaxy, once teetering on the edge of destruction, was now facing an opportunity for peace, an opportunity that Aiden and Zeira had fought for, bled for, and sacrificed everything to achieve. But as the weight of the aftermath began to sink in, they both understood that peace was not something easily won, nor was it something that could be sustained without further challenges. The Council of Civilizations, a group that had once been divided by mistrust and fear, now stood united. The peace they had fought for, the peace between Earth Veyrith and the other alien races, had been secured, and a new era of cooperation began to dawn. But it was a peace built on the fragile foundation of sacrifices, made alliances forged in blood, and a commitment that would forever bind Aiden, Zeira, and their child to the future of the galaxy. Zeira sat in the grand hall of the Veyrithian palace, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her shoulders. Beside her, Aiden watched as the council members took their seats, each of them representing a different faction, each of them carrying their own burdens of the past. The room was filled with a sense of quiet anticipation. For the first time in history, they had gathered not to discuss war, but to discuss how to move forward, how to build the future they had so long desired. Aiden, Zeira whispered, her voice laced with exhaustion, but also with a sense of peace. "We did it. We built something better. But we both know it's not over yet." Aiden nodded, his thoughts lingering on the child they had brought into this world. Their son, their beacon of hope, was the key to everything. But they both knew that his true potential remained a secret one they would keep hidden for the sake of the future. The galaxy was not ready to know what their son was truly capable of, nor did they need to. What mattered was that he had the potential to lead, to heal, and to bring about a new age of peace. "You're right," Aiden replied softly, his hand gently squeezing hers. "We've built a foundation, but there will always be those who try to tear it down. We must be vigilant. For him, for the future." Zeira turned her gaze to the far side of the room, where their son slept peacefully in her arms. The child they had once feared would be their undoing was now their most powerful ally. Yet as much as they had wanted to protect him, as much as they had fought to keep him safe, they both knew that the child's true strength was more than just political leverage. It was something far more ancient, something that neither Veyrith nor Earth nor any of the other civilizations could comprehend. The secret that they had kept, the secret of his power, was something only the two of them truly understood. Their son was the living embodiment of the ancient Veyrithian bloodline, a bloodline whose technology and wisdom had shaped the galaxy for centuries. His potential was limitless, and yet Zeira and Aiden had made the decision to keep that power hidden, to shield the child from those who would use him as a weapon. The council meeting began, and the room fell silent. One by one, the representatives from each of the major civilizations took the floor discussing the future they would build together. There were pledges of cooperation, of rebuilding trust, and of setting aside old hostilities. The peace was fragile, but it was real. But in the midst of this hopeful atmosphere, there were still whispers. Whispers of the child, of the strange, almost unnatural calm he had brought with him. There were rumors that the child held the power to end wars, to heal wounds, and to reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. Some feared that such power, if unleashed, could make the galaxy too vulnerable to control. Others feared that it would make the child a target for those who still sought to dominate and destroy. And so Zeira and Aiden made a quiet pact, one that would ensure the safety of their child and the stability of the peace they had worked so hard to achieve. They would never reveal the full extent of their son's power. They would never allow anyone to use him as a weapon. And most importantly, they would keep the secret of Zeira's true origins hidden for if the galaxy ever learned that she was not truly a Veyrith. If they learned of the ancient Veyrithian blood that flowed through her veins, it could undo everything they had built. As the council session drew to a close, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Aiden and Zeira had become symbols of hope, of what could be achieved when different civilizations chose to unite rather than divide. But even as the galaxy began to rebuild, even as peace was forged through sweat and sacrifice, there were forces still lurking in the shadows. There would always be those who sought to challenge the peace, to tear apart the fragile unity they had fought so hard to build. But Zeira and Aiden were ready. Their son, though still a child, would one day be the force that would hold the galaxy together, and they would protect him with everything they had. As the final decision was made, and the council voted to officially recognize the new alliance, one that stretched across species and planets, Zeira looked down at their son, her hand cradling his tiny form. His future was uncertain, but the love and protection surrounding him were not. She had done what she had set out to do. She had secured a future for him, a future where he would one day grow into the leader he was destined to be. The galaxy had entered a new age, an age of peace built not just on diplomacy and treaties, but on the strength of a family that had fought for what they believed in. And while the truth of their son's power would remain hidden, the legacy of what they had built together would never be forgotten. In the quiet moments that followed, as Zeira and Aiden watched the stars from the balcony of the palace, they knew that they had done everything they could to ensure a future of hope. But they also knew that their work was far from over. The child they had brought into the world was more than just a beacon of hope. He was the key to the galaxy's survival, and together they would protect that future with their lives no matter the cost. For in the end, it was not just a war they had won, but a legacy they had secured, one that would be passed down through the generations. In the years that followed, Aiden and Zeira's legacy flourished, a testament to the sacrifices they had made and the peace they had forged. Their son, the key to a future they had fought to protect, grew in the shadow of his parents' love and resilience. His true potential remained a secret, carefully guarded, yet in his eyes burned the promise of a new galaxy, one built not on the foundation of power and fear, but on understanding and cooperation. Though the galaxy had entered an age of peace, it was a peace that required constant vigilance. Zeira and Aiden never stopped protecting their son, knowing that the forces of darkness, while beaten back, would never completely vanish. As rulers of a united galaxy, they had become symbols of what could be achieved when love and duty were combined. But they understood that true peace required more than just agreements. It required the courage to defend it every day. In quiet moments when the weight of their responsibility seemed too much to bear, they would look to the stars and remember the journey they had taken together. From enemies to allies, from doubt to certainty, their love had been the driving force behind everything they had achieved. Their story had begun as one of unlikely romance, but it had transformed into a legend, a story of sacrifice, of love that transcended the stars. As the galaxy continued to heal, Aiden and Zeira knew their fight wasn't over. They had built something worth protecting, something worth dying for, and together with their son, they would ensure that peace would endure for generations to come.